All right, let's dive right in. Today in this explainer, we are completely demystifying the actual legal boundaries between everyday citizens and private security guards. If you've ever wondered exactly where the line is drawn when you interact with security at a mall, a concert, or your office building, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to look at this whole thing specifically through the lens of civil law to uncover the hidden legal framework that really dictates these everyday interactions. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The limits of authority. 2. Torts, paying for mistakes. 3. The citizen's arrest. 4. Searches and surveillance. And 5. Civil rights and discrimination. Now, before we get too deep into the weeds, you might be wondering where we're getting all these facts. Everything we're covering comes straight out of the official State of Oregon Unarmed Private Security Professional Training Manual. So this isn't just us guessing. These are the literal statutory guidelines and training standards used to certify actual security professionals. So I want you to picture this. You're cruising past a uniformed security guard at a massive shopping center. They've got the radio, the official-looking badge, the whole shebang. It naturally makes you wonder, right? How much actual legal power does this person have over you? Well, prepare to have your mind blown a little bit because the answer is incredibly simple, exactly the same as you. Seriously, a private security professional fundamentally has no more inherent legal authority than any other regular private citizen walking down the street. Okay, that brings us to Section 1, the limits of authority. Let's explore the foundation of a guard's granted power. So if guards just have the power of a regular citizen, how do they actually do their jobs? Well, it all comes down to civil law. Their authority is strictly granted by the property owner through a private contract. Police officers operate under criminal law, which is where the government punishes societal wrongs. But private security? They operate entirely in the realm of civil law. They are just private parties dealing with other private parties. They operate under contracts, and when they mess up, they don't just get a slap on the wrist. They get completely entangled in civil disputes and expensive lawsuits. Which leads us right into Section 2, torts, paying for mistakes. We are looking at the very high price of overstepping boundaries. Since security operates under civil law, if they cross the line, they commit a tort, which is basically a private wrong that ends up in a civil lawsuit. Let's look at how incredibly easily a routine shift can turn into a civil nightmare. Take assault. That isn't necessarily even hitting someone, it's just the threat of harm, like aggressive posturing. Battery is the actual harmful physical contact, like an unjustified shove. What about false imprisonment? If a guard unlawfully detains you or locks you in a room without legal cause, boom, that's a tort. Conversion is basically the civil equivalent of theft. Imagine a guard confiscating what they think is a fake ID and just refusing to give it back. Or fraud. That could be falsely telling a paying patron they are legally required to leave when they aren't, tricking them out of a service they actually paid for. These are literal traps they have to avoid. Moving on to Section 3, the citizen's arrest. This is really the absolute peak of a guard's granted power. If a guard is going to make a citizen's arrest, they absolutely need probable cause. That's a substantial objective basis to believe an offense occurred and that specific person did it. But here is the kicker, and it's a huge one. Unlike a police officer who can arrest someone based on witness statements after the fact, a private citizen, meaning our security guard, has to literally watch the crime happen right in their presence to act on it. Let's actually break down the exact legal tightrope a guard has to walk to avoid a false arrest tort. Step 1, the crime must be committed right there in their presence. Step 2, they must establish that probable cause. Step 3, they have to deliver the arrested person to a peace officer without unnecessary delay. And wait, let's clarify that word deliver, because the manual explicitly states this means seeking consent to wait around for the real police to show up. It absolutely does not mean throwing a suspect in the trunk of a car and transporting them. So, what happens if things get physical and a suspect resists? Well, any use of force must be reasonably believed to be strictly necessary. A guard can use force to defend themselves or someone else, stop a criminal trespass, protect property, or make that citizen's arrest. But take a close look at that very last point, because it's a total game changer. Security guards have absolutely no legal duty to act. None. They are never legally forced to fight, just backing away or retreating is completely allowed under the law. All right, Section 4, searches and surveillance. Let's talk about navigating daily interactions and privacy. We have all been here. It's a highly relatable scenario. You're walking out of a big retail store or leaving a concert, and a guard points right at your bag. Be honest, you've probably wondered, can a security guard actually force you to open your backpack at the exit? Well, the blunt legal reality is, nope. They can only search it if you consent.
Even if they are super suspicious you snagged something, mere suspicion doesn't give them the right to force a search. If you say no, and they physically force the issue or block you from leaving without making a formal citizen's arrest, they are marching straight into those civil torts we just talked about, like battery or false imprisonment. Plus, you can withdraw your consent whenever you want.
And what about surveillance? The whole thing hinges on this idea of an expectation of privacy. In places like bathrooms or changing areas, that expectation is incredibly high, so surveillance is just a flat-out no. And then there's audio recording. In Oregon, for example, the state law says that recording in-person conversations generally requires all parties involved to be informed that it's happening. Guards really have to tiptoe around these privacy laws so they don't trigger massive civil violations.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, Civil Rights and Discrimination, Protecting Public Accommodation.
One of the biggest areas where guards bump into strict civil rights boundaries is the Americans with Disabilities Act, specifically when it comes to service animals. Look at the legal definition. It's a dog, or, fun fact, a miniature horse, individually trained to perform specific tasks directly related to a disability. We've kind of got to bust a common myth here. Emotional support animals that just provide comfort, they literally do not meet this federal legal definition, so they aren't granted that same broad public access.
Since the ADA is hardcore civil rights law, security is boxed into some incredibly tight boundaries. If it's not super obvious that an animal is a service animal, guards can ask exactly 2 questions. 1, is the animal required because of a disability? And 2, what work or task has the animal been trained to perform? That is it, full stop. They absolutely cannot ask for proof of certification, and there is no way they can ask about the nature of the person's actual disability. Doing that violates federal civil rights law, which really just proves how carefully they have to tread in this civil law arena.
Wow, we've covered a ton of ground today in this explainer, from the strict limits of authority and dodging civil torts, all the way to physical citizens' arrests and federal ADA rules. It really all boils down to a massive, delicate balancing act governed by civil law. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. Where exactly is the line between feeling safe in our public spaces and protecting our own civil liberties? I guarantee the next time you read the fine print on a concert ticket or walk past a guard at the mall, you're going to view that legal boundary in a completely different light. Thanks for hanging out with me, and keep learning.